Are you looking for Halloween DIYs that are cute, colorful, and fun instead of spooky and scary? In this video, I'm sharing not your typical spooky decor. I'm sharing adorable, colorful fall Halloween DIYs that you can make easily in your own home. From pumpkins to trick-or-treaters, I'll show you whimsical DIY Halloween decor that brightens up your space and brings cozy vibes without the fright. I'm Cindy, my husband is Chris. We are a husband and wife team who love to bring you tips, techniques, and inspiration. Welcome to CNC DIY Factory. To create my not your typical spooky decor, I'm using the items from Sonnet September Maker's Box. In the monthly subscription box, each item is curated to coordinate with each other, and this box is the fall box with the gorgeous fall colors. There are 2 exclusive papers from Recycled Treasure, 2 exclusive papers from the Painted Photographer, 2 paint colors from both the DIY paint line and the Fusion paint line, and 1 Sweet Pickins milk paint color, along with a napkin and a thank you card from Sonnet. Plus, Sonnet now includes 5 digital downloads for creating. Let's see where my creativity will go and if I can inspire you to create outside the box. In this project, we are using the beautiful napkin from the September Maker's Box, along with a metal tart tin from the Dollar Tree, and a resin casting from the IOD Hello Pumpkin mold from a couple of years ago. I will start with cutting out one of the squares from the napkin and separating the ply from the back. I want to trim this to fit inside of the tin, so I will use my fingernails to very carefully crease the napkin along the inside curve of the tin, and then I'll cut that out. I am wanting to create a rusty crusty door hanger or ornament for fall, so I am using the Dixie Belle patina paint in bronze, and I will apply 2 good coats of this to the inside rim of the tin and the entire back side, and I'll dry the first coat with my heat gun. The second coat of paint, I need it to remain wet for the next step in this process. You can see that the second coat has a much better coverage than the first coat, which is good when you want to create a rust effect. Once I have the second coat applied, I will take the Dixie Belle patina sprays in both the green and the blue, and I will spritz the wet bronze patina paint. Now normally this is left to dry on its own overnight to allow the chemical reaction to happen, but I am much too impatient, so I'm using my heat gun to push the process along. To stop the rust effect from continuing and to seal it in, it is important to apply the Dixie Belle Patina Guard Sealer once it is completely dry. Normally I would use a white or a brighter color under my decoupage paper, but for this project, I want the colors to be a bit more moody, so I'm using the Sandy Blonde from DIY Paint for my base color. Once that is dry, I will apply 1 thin coat of the DIY liquid patina and then lay my napkin carefully into the tin and smooth it out. Now napkins can be a bit finicky to work with because they are so thin, but just take your time and don't overwork your brush while smoothing out the napkin. While that is drying, I will work on the resin mold. I used a black fast cast resin from Alumilite. If you want to try this, I will have it linked in my affiliate links in the description box below. I'm using the Fusion Mineral Paint in Mustard that came in the September Makers box, and I'll apply one coat to the pumpkin. Then I'll use the Renfrew Blue that is also from Fusion Mineral Paint and in the Makers box to paint the leaf and the vine on the pumpkin. Fusion Mineral Paint has a built-in top coat, so I don't need to worry about applying a top coat later. For the stem of the pumpkin, I am using the Art Alchemy metallic paint in hazelnut. And to give the pumpkin the same watercolor look as a napkin, I'm using the redesigned by Prima Decor wax in Meteor Showers and the Art Alchemy wax in Moss Green. Now I'm just using a Q-tip to apply the waxes, but you can use your finger or a makeup applicator to get into the creases of the mold. At this point, the tin does not need to be sealed, but I'm applying the DIY clear wax to the inside of the rim so that when I apply the DIY dark wax, I can wipe back as much or as little as I want to achieve the rusty, crusty look I am going for. Now before the wax can dry, I am also applying the DIY dark dust and the warm dust for a rusty texture. The dust melts into the wet wax, and once the wax is cured, the dust is permanent. But wait, I'm not quite done adding wax. I want a bit of the turquoise color to pop on that napkin. So I am adding just a small amount of the DIY shipwrecked wax for that little bit of added patina. And once I'm happy with those results, I will use Tite Bond Quick and Thick to adhere the pumpkin mold to the front of the napkin. Now you can definitely stop here and it would be beautiful, but I want to take this a little bit further. I have a tiny little wood tag that I cut on my laser, and I want to use the Apothecary stamps by IOD and the IOD black ink to stamp the word fall onto the wood tag. Then I will use what wax is left in my wax brush and add just a bit of grunge to the wood tag. Then I'll add a rustic ribbon for hanging the ornament, but wait, where am I going to put that tag? So I decided to pull out this bark-like ribbon from Hobby Lobby along with some colored raffia to make a bow and add that to the top. Then I can glue my tag into the bow, and this project makes my heart smile. I just love creating and letting things just come together and make a project that makes me happy. Let me know in the comments if this has inspired you to make something with a napkin from the September's Makers box and what that project would be. For this project, I am using one of Sonnet's digital press downloads. Now, when you get these, they are a full 11 by 8 size, but I needed mine to be smaller. So I tried a couple of different sizes, and the one I found that worked the best was shrink down to 75% of the original size. Now don't worry, I am sure I will figure out how to use the other 2 prints that I made. That is the beauty of the digital press. They are yours to use at any time in any way you want. You just can't sell the individual papers. Now, as you just saw, I used the water tear method around the image. I want this to look a bit tattered and aged on the bottle. If you're looking for a very quick and easy project, this one is for you, so don't blink or you might miss it. Once I've made sure the size is perfect, I will use my Fusion decoupage and transfer gel and apply a nice even coat to the back of the rice paper. I like to use this decoupage medium when working with the thicker papers like the rice paper. I feel it doesn't soak into the paper so easily or quickly, and it allows me to smooth it out without worry of tearing or wrinkling. To help smooth out the rice paper on a rounded surface, a balled up piece of plastic wrap is your best friend. Once the paper is secured to the bottle, I will go over the paper with a good coat of the decoupage and transfer gel to seal it in. I'm being careful not to get any on the glass bottle, but if I do, I just take a baby wipe and clean around the edge so there isn't a film left once it is dry. And that is it, folks. A quick and easy DIY project that is perfect for your beautiful fall decor. In this project, I am using a 16-inch wood round door hanger. I will start by painting the front of the board with vintage linen by DIY Paint, but any white or light colored paint would work if you don't have this on hand. To have a completed and finished product when I'm done, I'm going to stain the back and the sides of the board with Minwax water-based stain in Legacy Brown. I get this at Lowe's or Menards, and they can tint the base to any color you choose at the paint counter. I like using this water-based stain because it's safe to use indoors. It doesn't have any odor and it dries super fast. But if you don't have a stain, you can use a watered down paint and wipe off the excess to get the stained effect. I have had this file on my laser for almost a year, and I am so excited to finally get it cut and use it. It says, "Hey Boo," with a sweet little ghost and some stars. I'm adhering the pieces to some cardboard with masking tape held down with the sticky side up. This makes it so much easier to paint the small or thin pieces and not get paint all over my fingers. I am painting the words and the ghost with Fusion's Victorian lace, and I'm using a piece of makeup sponge as my applicator. I like to stipple or dab the paint on because it leaves a slight texture to the surface. For the 3 little stars, I'm going to use the mustard from Fusion that was in the maker's box. Now, I decided after I painted the words and the ghost that I wanted the words to be a different color, so I'm using the Renfrew Blue by Fusion that was also in the maker's box. And finally, for the eyes and mouth of the ghost, I am using the color Ash by Fusion Mineral Paint. Okay, where are my plaid lovers out there? I was so happy when I saw this in the maker's box this month, and I knew this would be perfect as the backdrop to my door hanger. So I'll cut out a piece that is slightly bigger than the wood round, and using my Fusion decoupage and transfer gel, I will decoupage this to the front of my board. To decoupage, I will start with applying a strip of the decoupage medium to the board. Then I'll spritz my paper with my water mister and smooth the paper down with my paintbrush, and sometimes I'll use my fingers. Then I will work in sections across the board, working slowly to ensure that I don't have any wrinkles, and then I'll apply a final coat of the decoupage gel over the top to seal the paper. Once the paper is completely dry, I will use my finger sander, which is a game changer for me. And in a downward motion, I'll sand off the excess paper, leaving a clean, crisp edge. Then all that is left is to adhere all of the laser cut and painted pieces to the front of the door hanger. I like to use Stick Fast CA glue in the thick formula, and I'll have this linked in the description box below. I don't suggest using the thin formula with the Stick Fast or any of the super glues because it will flow all over your project and you might end up sticking your fingers to it as well. OMG! Isn't this the cutest door hanger ever? And Roycycled Treasures Autumn Hearth Plaid paper is the best. For this project, I went out to my shop and I found a piece of high-grade birch plywood. This is about 17 inches by 9.5 inches, and it's about a 1/2 inch thick. I sanded down the edges and the corners so they were nice and smooth, and I'll start by staining the back and the sides with the Minwax water-based stain in Legacy Brown. Now this is my favorite basic brown stain color, but you can find this stain at the paint counter at Lowe's and Menards, and they will tint the base to any color you choose. This stain is non-combustible, there's no odor, and it dries very quickly. For the front of the board, I am applying 1 coat of the vintage linen DIY paint. I will be using the Roycycled decoupage paper called Whispers of Fall from the September Maker's Box. Now, complete transparency, and please don't hate me, when I saw this paper, it reminded me of a Monet-style painting, and in my opinion, abstract and a bit chaotic. I thought, what in the world am I going to do with this? And then I realized I had put myself into a creative box and therefore could not see the potential of this beautiful paper until I really looked at it. And then I saw it. I saw a wet, cold fall evening with children dressed in costumes, happily running up and down the block with their candy buckets in hand. And that is exactly what I'm going to create. Once I have the part of the paper that I want to use on this board cut out, I will use my DIY liquid patina and apply an even layer of the medium to the board. I'll spritz my paper, smooth it down with my paintbrush, and I will work in sections across the board until I have the entire paper decoupaged down. Once the paper is completely dry, I will use my finger sander and in a downward motion sand off the excess paper, leaving a smooth edge. Essential Stencil just came out with new Halloween stencils, and this Trick-or-Treaters stencil is from the new release. I knew I wanted to make something with this, but just didn't have the right inspiration until I really looked at Royce's paper and it all just fell into place. I will be using Fusion Mineral paint in cast iron and an Essential Stencil stencil brush. When stenciling, the main tip I can give you is to make sure you have a dry brush. I will dip my brush into the paint and then I'll offload the excess paint onto a lint-free towel, working the paint up into the bristles of the brush. Then I'll use a swirling motion across the stencil with light pressure and apply the paint. This method is my preferred application in order to avoid any bleed through under the stencil, and I get crisp, clean lines every time. Now, a little bit about me, I love to stencil, and I have quite the library of stencils that I can use in my studio. Another one from Essential Stencil is called Halloween Picket Fence, and this was from last year's Halloween release, so I don't know if it's available. But I want to use this tree and I want to set it off to the side as though it's reaching across the walkway behind the children. Every stencil has what is called bridges. These are the little pieces of mylar in the design that hold the piece together. Sometimes I don't mind the little spaces left on my project, but for this one, I want everything to look like a solid silhouette, so I will use a detail brush and just go around the entire piece and fill in all of those blank spaces left by the bridges. To give this board a framed look, I will use the paint that is still in my stencil brush and just dry brush in a downward motion all around the edge of the board. I think this adds just a little something to the piece. Now to add just a bit of a sentiment, I am going to use another Essential stencil from the Stencil of the Month Club from last year. This was a bonus stencil from their premium set. Now I realize that not everyone can get these stencils, but if you have a Cricut or a Silhouette machine, you could create your own stencils, or you could print off images from the internet that are free and create on your own cardstock. Or for the words, you could use stamps. The whole premise for me with this project is to be creative and to get out of the box that I put myself into. And maybe this will inspire you as well if you find yourself in that same box. When I'm in the creative space, sometimes I find I have to take a leap of faith. I felt these children were floating and needed a pathway. I am great with stencils, but freehand is a horse of a different color. I had to trust that I was not going to mess this up by adding the cast iron paint below the feet of the trick-or-treaters, and I think it turned out pretty good. The last thing I need to do is to add some DIY clear wax and then follow this up with the DIY dark wax and buff it off just a little bit. Then this is ready to welcome all the trick-or-treaters in the neighborhood to your door. This project is probably my favorite. It started out as WTH and ended with WOW. For this project, I am starting with the Sweet Pickins milk paint in Curry that came in the September's Maker's Box. This is a beautiful golden yellow color, perfect for the fall and Halloween season. Milk paint is a 1-to-1 ratio, so however much powder you add the same amount of water. It needs to be mixed well, and I like to use a milk frother to mix mine, but a craft stick or a small whisk will work as well. Then I'll set this off to the side to thicken up for about 10 minutes. I have this large thrifted board in my studio, and it looks like it was a dry erase board, and it will not come out of the frame. Since it is so slick, I took it outside and I gave it 2 good coats of shellac so the paint had something to grip onto. I'm using Fusion Mineral paint in cast iron to paint the frame, and I will give it 2 good coats for full coverage. Now the milk paint is thickened up and ready to use. The first coat of milk paint is always scary. It hardly ever has good coverage until you apply the second coat. I will dry the milk paint with my heat gun and try to force the crackle and crazing that I love from the milk paint. This is after the first coat has dried, and I can see the crackle and crazing, but it definitely needs another coat of paint. And you can see that the second coat provides a better coverage, and I mixed up just the right amount for 2 coats. Unfortunately, I want the coverage to be a bit better than this, so I'll mix up just a little bit more paint, and after the second coat is dry, I will add the third coat of milk paint. For my third coat of milk paint, I want to see if I can get any brush strokes or textures, so I am applying the paint in a crisscross fashion. I'm not sure if it'll stay this way because milk paint is actually self-leveling and the brush strokes usually smooth out on their own. So as I'm drying the third coat with my heat gun, it looks like I might have some movement in the paint with the brush strokes, but we'll have to wait to see what it looks like at the end. So for this project, I went to my laser and I pulled up an original design that I created last year of this witch hat and moon and stars. I enlarged the original design to better fit my project, and now I need to paint the outline. I'm using my piece of cardboard with masking tape stuck to it with the sticky side up to hold my thin or small pieces for painting. I'm using the Fusion cast iron and a makeup sponge to apply the paint, and this will get 2 coats. On a second piece of cardboard with a sticky masking tape, I will lay out the hatband pieces and the moon and stars. I'm using the DIY paints Mermaid Tail and Electrified that were in the September Makers box for the hatband pieces. These will get 2 coats, and since they are DIY paint and can be reactivated with water, I will seal them with a matte brush-on varnish. For the moon and stars, I will use the Fusion Mineral paint in Victorian Lace as my base color. I want these to have a glow about them, so I'm going to add the mustard paint color from Fusion that was in the September's Makers box and blend them with a clean, dry makeup sponge. I wanted the moon to glow, but I didn't want it to look too much like the stars. I also wanted it to stand out a bit, but not blend in or get lost in the curry color milk paint. So I'm going to add just a little bit of the mustard color around the edges and blend it out with my finger. For the top and brim of the witch's hat, I am applying 1 coat of the DIY vintage linen to ensure that the colors for the star of this show stand out bright. And who is that star, you might ask? Well, it's Moody Night by the painted photographer. When I saw this paper, my imagination went straight to a witch's hat. So I will use the pieces of the hat as a template, and on the back side of the rice paper, I'll trace out the shapes and cut the rice paper slightly larger than the outline. Then I'll use the Fusion decoupage and transfer gel to adhere the rice paper to the hat pieces. Once the paper is dry, I will use my finger sander to sand off the excess paper around the edges of each piece. I really like this crow sitting on the pumpkin, and I want it to stand out as a focal point. So I will use the Fusion cast iron and paint in the crow, being careful not to cover up his big blue eye. Once the cast iron is dry, I will go over that with Master's Touch acrylic paint in pearlized carbon black to give it a bit of a blue shimmer to the crow. Now we can put all of the pieces together. I will use Stick Fast CA glue in the thick formula to adhere all of the pieces to the framed picture. The Fusion mineral paint has a built-in sealer, and I had already sealed the DIY paint on the hat band, but the Sweet Pickins milk paint hasn't been sealed yet, and it has to get a sealer put on it. I had thought about using the Sweet Pickins oil wax in dark, but I didn't want it to get on the other pieces, so I'm using the DIY clear wax, and I'm following that up with the Howard's chalk teak wax in dark. I will apply the wax, and then with a lint-free towel, I'll wipe off the excess. I like this dark wax because of the brown color. I could have used the DIY dark wax, but that leans more to the black than the brown, and I definitely wanted the brown hue for this piece. This dark wax brings out all of that wonderful crackle and crazing in the milk paint that I absolutely love, and it deepens the curry color just slightly. Just when I thought I was finished, the piece spoke to me and said it needed a little glam on the hat band. I just bought these 2 Pentart Glow glitter pastes in blue and green, and this is the perfect opportunity to try them. And here's the star. This project is so fun and whimsical, and I enjoyed the creative process of making it. Here are all 5 of the projects I made today using the papers and paints from Sonnet's September Maker's Box. This box pushes me out of my own creative box every month, and it surprises me every time. If you would like to have your own creative box shipped to your door every month, you can skip the wait list and use my affiliate link in the description box below to sign up for the October box. I hear it's the holiday box and it is going to be good. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this video inspiring as well as informative and maybe a bit amusing as well. And I invite you to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, keep practicing random acts of crafting. Bye for now.